Hi guys, this is channel Psalm 86, and I wanted to do just a short video today to show more of the Kabbalistic underlining of a lot of these cults, heresies, false teachings, etc., etc. Today I want to talk a little bit about Pope Francis. And I find it very, very concerning in many ways that people don't, it's just, I think really that people don't do their research, and the fact that it's documented that the Jesuits are a corrupt organization really set out to indoctrinate and deceive people and lead people back to the Roman Catholic Church. If you look into Ignatius of Loyola, he was heavily, heavily, heavily into all that contemplative prayer, all that mysticism. It's not a secret. It's not something that's ever been kept secret. I mean, he was. I mean, you people like John Crowder, of all people, heretics like him, have praised Loyola for his mysticism and all of that stuff. I mean, it's not any kind of secret, and it's baffling to me that Christians, I'm sorry to say, in some ways I'm sorry to say, but in other ways I'm not. I'm not saying this to be hateful, but compromised Christians that have either shut down their discernment skills, or they just don't want to accept that the Catholic Church really is not a Christian, is not part of the church, a Christian church, think this man is godly, and it's like they've turned a blind eye to the stuff that this man has promoted and what he comes from. And it's like people openly say he's a Jesuit, like nothing, like it's supposed to bring some kind of honor or some kind of dignity, and it really isn't. It's a corrupt group of people. It started with a corrupt guy, Ignatius Loyola. I don't endorse this website, by the way, gotquestions.org, but sometimes they answer some questions, pretty fairly. If you just type in the Jesuits documentary, you can find several of them on YouTube that are pretty legit. So, of course, you have to, be kind of picky and choosy, because even though some people might be quote unquote exposing stuff, that doesn't mean that they don't always are leading people wrong. I think the Seventh Day Adventists have a good one out, but yet they're kind of leading people to that, the Seventh Day Adventists, so you kind of have to be careful when you watch documentaries that are exposing stuff, because you never know, they could have, they could be in error themselves, is what I'm saying. I wanted to show, or read this rather, to you guys. I thought this was quite interesting. This is a book by Carl Jung, and I talk about him in my video called Kaballah Therapy and Kaballah Purpose Driven. I did that last week, and I talk a little bit about Carl Jung, Rick Warren, and Sigmund Freud, and their Kabbalah roots, if you will. And it's a book called Unlikely Companions, C.G. Jung on the Spiritual Exercises of Ignatius of Loyola. And I'm just going to read just a little bit here. The contemplation to attain love, Jung quotes from Izquierdas, commenting that this meditation brings out man's dependence on his creative foundation or source, the divinity, the unconscious. Man cannot simply live out of his own consciousness and will. The meditation for Jesuits is on the meeting of Christ with his mother. This is a supernatural event. Psychologically, therefore, it happens in the unconscious. Christ's return to his mother is his return to his origins, his earth, his unconscious. Consciousness and unconscious are joined. The masculine creative God of the contemplation to attain love is complemented by his feminine side. This corresponds to the androgynous nature of the image of Christ, and in general to the archetypal divine pair in the unconscious. But instead of taking up this feminine side in God, the Jesuits' meditation transfers this mother to the church. The second part of the Jesuits' meditation, therefore, is on the rules for thinking with the church. Young quotes most of the rules with almost no comment. He points out the blindness of faith and the role of fear, which shows that God is not just all love. Young concludes with some remarks on Jesuits and their influence. They serve the church and even lie to do so. Hello, that is what they do. He quotes Funk with approval, who says that the Jesuit system destroys individuality and has none of the individuality discretion of benediction spiritually. All are forced to persuade into a lifeless, rigid uniformity. Young also noted the opposite earlier with regard to Ignatius and the SE. Here, too, he exempts Ignatius from the accusation, saying that the system rather grew up in the Jesuit order, which became a leading force for building the church, the institution, the mother, at the expense of the individual. Young points ahead to the next series of lectures in which he will talk about another movement beginning in the Middle Ages, alchemy, which stressed the individual, that individual living point, which is the image of the fullness of God. And then it goes on to another of the letters, etc., etc., etc. My reason for reading that is to point out that to point out the androgynous nature that these people believe. I talked the other day about how the Catholics, which I grew up Catholic myself, their strong adoration of Mary. You know, it's so strong. It's really heretical. You know, they, of course, they say they don't worship Mary, but my own mom is still a devout Catholic. As much as I've tried to witness to her, she says she acknowledges Christ. She says that we need Christ to go to heaven, but there's always the but. We need Mary too. It's always Mary, 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 Mary with Catholics. Right here in this article, and I don't endorse this website either, even though I do read it many times, but I don't endorse any sites from Lighthouse Trails. Pope Francis spiritually founded on contemplative tradition. And again, it goes back to that Ignatius of Loyola. The man was big time, big time, big time a um, a mystic. They give a lot of good links, like the Jesuit agenda right here. A Jesuit Pope, understanding the Jesuit agenda and the evangelical Protestant church. And it goes back into the history. Who was Ignatius Loyola? It talks about it gives a little bit of the Jesuit oath. I can put this link, as a matter of fact, I'll take out of this and I'll just put this one right here, this main one. Pope Francis spiritually founded on contemplative prayer. And if you just scroll down, you have several links here. And then this one right here, the Jesuit agenda, just click on it. I'll take you right to it. As a matter of fact, it's a booklet track. And I think you can buy the Lighthouse Trails booklet tracks for like $1.99 or $2. I mean, they're like dirt cheap. But I wanted to show this right quick. Sephiroth. I've talked about this several times. In the Sephiroth, which is the primordial man Adam in ways, even though they don't believe that he was necessarily a person, but yet others do. It's kind of too much to get into the Adam Kadmon, but that's really the goal, to come back to that Adam Kadmon. That was really the goal before the goal of man, before the vessels burst and there was basically chaos. There's two sides. There's the Keter, which is the crown, but then there's these sides. This side is the male side, and the female side, and then the middle side. This, another word for the Malkuth, is also Shekinah. Believe it or not. And I'm not going to get off topic here, but I'll just give a little side note. One of the beliefs in the Kabbalah tradition is that you worship through the Shekinah is really, let's just say this is the earth, okay, and this is Shekinah or Malkuth, but if I'm going to refer to it as Shekinah, is you have to go through here, the Shekinah, to kind of break through in here. That's how you kind of break into that realm is through the Shekinah. Another thing with the Shekinah is that's really the female divine presence. It's pretty ironic, that the Jesuits and a lot of this, a lot of these cult, even Hindus, and all these, they have all this, they're real big on this female aspect, the New Agers really, I mean, let's just get down to it. Everybody's big on this goddess thing, this whole goddess thing. And, again, it's obvious in the Catholic Church, and I never really looked at it that way until really I started studying Kabbalah and seeing the underlining of a lot of these heresies of how much Mary is looked at as like a goddess. It's ironic when you read at the very end of Jeremiah. It's not the last chapter, but it's towards the end when Jeremiah he's at the outskirts of Babylon, and he once one last time warns them and to repent, and gives them warning, and actually gives them, what prophesies to them about what the Lord is saying. And they turn around and they basically say that they're still going to worship the Queen of Heaven. I mean, it's like almost like they spit in Jeremiah's face. And it's just so crazy to me, really, that Queen of Heaven is talked about in not only Catholicism but in Islam, this Queen of Heaven. And here it is in the Bible talk negatively again about, it's obvious that it is spoken of in a heretical context. It's not of God, not at all of God. And again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like I'm not sorry for speaking the truth. I'm only sorry if I sound like I'm being condescending or being, rude. And I don't mean to be, but I'm saying this in love to anybody that's listening that really sincerely thinks that Catholicism is just another denomination. It's not. Until people start to wake up, there's really, as I've said this in other videos, there's really not much. I know there's the discernment sites are increasing and more people are wanting to speak out, and that's great. If the Lord has put the conviction on you to speak out, I think that's great. But, really at the end of the day, the Lord sends the strong delusion. I think a lot of times people that are deceived, it's almost like a judgment. The only thing you can warn, but to beat someone over the head, there you really can't. It's really the Lord that's got to open their eyes. But anyway, before I get too off into that point, I want to digress here to my second point before I get to my videos. Um, I'm I'm going to show two videos before I end it, and one of them is Pope Francis and his giving credence, if you will, to the Big Bang Theory. And then right after that is literally a Kabbalist. His name is Daniel Matt or Matt Daniel. Like, I don't. It's one of. I think it's Daniel Matt is his name. He's a Kabbalist, and he's written books on Kabbalah, and he gives lectures on Kabbalah, and he has a book called, I think, God in the Big Bang. I can't remember exactly. I don't think it's the Big Bang, but he's talking about the Big Bang and the similarities of the Big Bang Theory. I have right here in front of me a PDF of the Zohar, and I just want to read just a little excerpt of it so you can hear from the horse's mouth, for lack of a better term, of what the Zohar says, from the Zohar itself about creation and how they interpret this as the Big Bang Theory. And I'm going to warn you, they do give some scripture references in here. But of course, if you know the context of the scriptures given, a lot of it's taken out of context. The creation of Elohim. In the beginning, when the king conceived ordaining, he engraved engravings in the luster on high. A blinding spark flashed within the concealed from the mystery of the infinite, a cluster of vapor in formlessness set in a ring, not white, not black, not red, not green, no color at all. When a band spanned, it yielded radiant colors. Deep within the spark gushed a flow, imbuing colors below. Sorry. Concealed within the concealed of the mystery of the infinite, the flow broke through and did not break through its aura. It was not known at all until, under the impact of breaking through, on high in hidden point shown. Beyond that point nothing is shown. So it is called beginning, the first command of all. The enlightened will shine like the Zohar of the sky, and those who make masses righteous will shine like the stars forever and ever. And then it gives reference to Daniel 12:3. Zohar, the concealed of the concealed, struck its aura, the aura touched and did not touch this point. Then this beginning emanated and made itself a palace for its glory and its praise. There it sowed the seed of holiness to give birth to the benefit of the universe. The secret is her stock is a holy seed, and then it gives reference to Isaiah 6:13. Zohar, sowing a seed for its glory like the seed of fine purple silk. The silkworm wraps itself within and makes itself a palace. This palace is its praise and a benefit to all. With the beginning, the concealed one who is not known created the palace. This place is called Elohim. The secret is with beginning created Elohim, Genesis 1. Before I let you go, I once again plead with you guys, please do your own research. Don't take my word for this stuff. I ask you guys, anybody who thinks that the Catholic Church is legit, I truly ask you and beg you please to do your own research on the doctrines of what the Catholic Church believes and the parallels of the Catholic Church, Catholicism, and its Jesuit stuff, even these Kabbalistic type underlinings that it has. But until next time, guys, God bless you guys. Thank you for watching my videos, and you guys take care.
Pope Francis is bridging the gap between church and science this morning. The leader of the Catholic Church faces mixed reaction for controversial comments on evolution. Alan Pizzi is in Rome, where the Pope defended the Big Bang Theory. Alan, good morning.
Good morning. Well, fresh from having taken on conservatives at the Synod of Bishops, Pope Francis sided with science over dogma in an event at the Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences. In a direct contradiction of the beliefs of creationists, Francis said that when we read about creation in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, we run the risk of imagining God was a magician with a magic wand able to do everything, but that is not so. And he heartily condoned the Big Bang Theory that today is considered to be the origin of the universe. The Big Bang does not contradict the creative intervention of God, the Pope said. On the contrary, it requires it. 5 centuries ago, Galileo Galilei could have used Pope Francis. The Church branded the astronomer a heretic for arguing that the Earth revolved around the Sun. How times change. Pope Pius XII described evolution as a valid scientific approach to the development of humans, and Pope John Paul II went further and suggested evolution was more than a hypothesis and effectively proven fact. Even the conservative former Pope Benedict XVI said scientific theories on the origin and development of the universe and humans did not conflict with faith, although he said they left many questions unanswered. The Church reconciliation with science and evolution isn't revolutionary in the view of Professor Chester Gillis of Georgetown University.
Science is designed to tell you the how the universe works. Religion is designed to tell you why. Why is there a universe? Why is there anything rather than nothing? And what is the ultimate destination of that?
Given his job description, Pope Francis probably has the answers to those questions. But interestingly, he's not insisting that you have to take only his word for it. Jeff?
Alan, thank you very much.
When we think about the Big Bang, we have a view of cosmology which is now widely accepted within the scientific community and yet one that differs quite a bit from the traditional Judeo-Christian view of the creation, or even some of the creation stories of other cultures.
In some ways, these are dramatically different. The Big Bang Theory, which I would say is accepted by 99% of working cosmologists, posits that the universe began from a primordial seed, a tiny point smaller than a proton, from which the entire universe flashed into existence. And this seems worlds removed from Genesis chapter 1. God said, "Let there be light." You might say in both there's an effusion and effulgence of light, but Genesis posits a God in heaven running the show. Scientists speak of energy and matter emerging out of a primordial vacuum. What could be further apart? And yet, what I suggest in my book is that the mystical interpretation of Genesis really comes very close in certain regards to this theory of the Big Bang. Specifically, the Kaballah, the Jewish mystical tradition, speaks of a primordial point, a single point from which the whole universe emanates. This point, in fact, expands into a circle as the primordial point of the Big Bang began expanding and really has never stopped. Another parallel is an original oneness, an original unity, which has become fractured into the world of multiplicity that we inhabit. Kabbalah speaks of the breaking of the vessels, and cosmology speaks of broken symmetry.
So what you're saying is that although conventional fundamentalist types of religion have a very different view about the origins of the universe, that if we look at the mystical traditions, particularly the Jewish, but I imagine you would suggest that other mystical traditions seem to be much more in convergence with the contemporary cosmological picture.
Right, I think exactly. The point is not to become fixated on a literal reading of Genesis. The mystics in the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions offer a much more poetic and spiritual rendering of the biblical text. For example, the Zohar, the major text of the Kabbalah, translates the opening words of Genesis not as "in the beginning God created," but "in the beginning the infinite created God." So God turns from the subject of creation to the object of creation, which I think is not simply a heretical statement. I think what it says is that the God we imagine, whatever human conception we have of God, is really a secondary product. God ultimately is indescribable, or as the Kabbalah would say, is Ein Sof, the infinite.
Now we're beginning to throw out a number of terms, and I suppose we better start with Kabbalah, or sometimes pronounced Kaballah, and define for our viewers what that means.
Right. Literally, Kabbalah means receiving. The Hebrew root kabel means to receive. And you could translate Kabbalah as that which has been received, or receiving. That could mean really two different things. On the one hand, receiving wisdom from the past, turning to ancient sources of teaching, teachers or books, trying to drink in wisdom from the past. On the other hand, Kabbalah refers to something very immediate and spontaneous. You might say putting yourself in a receptive mode, through meditation, through reflection, trying to connect your divine spark, your soul, with the infinite source of being, receiving in that sense. And I think it's that combination of new and ancient, of immediate and past, that characterizes the Kabbalah and really helped to make it attractive to generations of spiritual seekers.
Now, let's go back once again to the Big Bang. It's a fascinating notion. In fact, you tell a wonderful story of how we even got this name, the Big Bang.
Yeah, it's remarkable that the term Big Bang, which now really is universally used, first came into use through a radio broadcast on the BBC in the 1950s. The BBC was interviewing a arch opponent of the Big Bang Theory, what came to be called the Big Bang Theory, Fred Hoyle. And he said that he was trying on air to come up with some put-down of this theory. He said, well, this Big Bang Theory, trying to poke fun at it, but that name caught on. Now really in some ways it's a misnomer, because there is no explosion. The reason there's not an explosion is that an explosion happens within space, whereas what the Big Bang teaches is that space itself came into existence through this expansion. So one should speak of an expansion rather than an explosion, and really an expansion that still goes on today, though at a much smaller rate. The important thing is that everything in the cosmos, not only us and our planet, the solar system, the galaxy, all galaxies in the entire universe, began as this infinitesimal point, this cosmic seed.
It boggles the mind, you know. I mean, it's enough to make somebody a mystic right there. It's the essence of mysticism. All is one. And at the moment of the beginning of the so-called Big Bang, it really was all of it in an infinitely dense point.
Right.
And yet most cosmologists are, I'm going to assume, are probably atheists. They don't think of it as necessarily an epiphany.
That's usually the image we have of the scientist. You know, the scientist as nerd is the caricature. I think that you might say cosmology is the science closest to theology. And I think the greatest scientists, the greatest cosmologists, have a spiritual sense of their work. Certainly Einstein, Heisenberg, Newton. These people saw their work as part of a spiritual search. And I think today we're at a point where scientists and religious thinkers are beginning to find common ground. You mentioned that it's mind-boggling, and really the reason I worked on this book was that my field of interest until now has been Kaballah itself and the Jewish mystical tradition. But in reading descriptions of the Big Bang, it struck me that this is more wild than the Zohar, than the major texts of the Kabbalah itself.